Hey people, welcome back to the Max Goodwin YouTube channel and another episode of our tier list series. In this episode we're going to be taking a look at every record signing for every Premier League team currently in the league and ranking them S, A, B, C or bin. If you're new to this format then I'll just quickly go through it with you. At the top we have S, which is obviously the best, then A, which is the sort of second best, B in the middle, C second worst, and then bin, which is like shouldn't be anywhere near the Premier League. So today we're going to be ranking every Premier League record signing. This is as of December 2020. Obviously next month's the January transfer window, so that could change for a couple of these clubs. So that's why I was doing it now, and then maybe in the summer we can take a look if any of these have changed at all. Before we get into it, be sure to drop a like on the video if you enjoy it and subscribe down below. Turn on notifications so you never miss any of our tier lists coming out. Also got a lot of good content coming out throughout the back end of 2021. We've got the Nottingham Forest career mode as well as the Premier League reaction show, which is going to continue throughout the rest of the year and into the new year, and obviously some great content coming out in 2021. Without any further ado, let's get straight into the tier list for this episode. Alright, so we are kicking things off with Arsenal. We're doing these in alphabetical order. The first one we've got is Nicola Pepe, £72 million from Lille. In his first season, got 5 goals, I believe, in 30-ish appearances. 30 starts in the league, and this season from 10 starts has about 2 or 3 goals. Not the best return. Really, it's not that bad considering how bad Arsenal have been. I think though, when you consider £72 million is the fee they spent on him, it's awful. He does have time though. He's only 25, I think, so he definitely has time and chance to improve. I certainly think if Arsenal can get into their stride with Arteta, he could be one of their most important players. I definitely wouldn't put him in the bin or even in C. I'd maybe say B because he has had some flashes of brilliance, but I would say he's probably towards the low end of the Bs for now. Okay, next up we have Aston Villa and Wesley or whatever his name is. He was signed from Club Brugge for £23 million. Sorry, I've got the notes up on my phone. Yeah, £23 million from Club Brugge. I don't even know if he's even at the club anymore. He's not really done very well at all. I think I'm going to put him in the bin simply because they spent that much money on him and then replaced him in January with Ali Samata, who has already left the club, and then replaced him with Ollie Watkins, who for my money has been one of the signings of the season, certainly for the amount of money Villa signed him for. So not the best, definitely not the best striker at all. I might quickly check how many goals he's actually scored. So he has 5 goals in 21 appearances, which is less than ideal, I would say. I was not really a fan of his signing in the first place. He was not really that good at Bruges anyway. And I certainly think that he has a bit of upside. He's definitely useful, but it's just, I mean, what else are you going to, other than lumping the ball up to him, what else are you really going to use him for? Next up we have the £20 million signing for Brighton and Hove Albion, that being Neal Mopay. 14 goals in 48 appearances, I believe. So returning a pretty decent amount of goals. It's the work off the ball he does as well, though. An excellent presser. Of course, imagine probably quite an irritating player as the defender to play against because he's all over you. So quick, so physical, so aggressive. It's not just the goals, it's also just his all-round play. I think it's been pretty good. I think I'm going to put him in B. A solid B. I think for Brighton's level, to get 14 league goals out of a striker in a year and a half is pretty decent. For £20 million as well, that's a pretty low risk fee coming up from the Championship. He's only 24, 25, so he's only really going to get better, you'd think. So yeah, that's a pretty solid one, I would say. Okay, we have got our next signing, that being Burnley's record signing, Chris Wood, the arrival from Leeds United, for about £15-ish million in 2017. Now, I think he's actually been quite good for the Clarets. He's a bit of a journeyman, he's had quite a journeyman career, but he's got about 38 goals in just over 100-ish appearances. Got 14 goals last season, his most prolific Premier League season. For £15 million, I think that's pretty good return on investment, personally. I think a solid B again, certainly no worse than that, what he offers them. He is a very Burnley player, very physical, very aggressive, good in the air, good, a good finisher, making the most of the chances that he actually gets. And yeah, 14 league goals last season. I'm just reading it now. So 14 last season, 10 in 18-19, and 10 in his debut season. I think that counts for a very good return on your investment for 15 million quid, especially for a player from the Championship. So solid B for Chris Wood. Next up, we have a very interesting one. It's Kepper, the record signing, of course, for Chelsea. Kepper Arrizabalaga. He cost Chelsea, I believe, around £72 million. Obviously, not quite covered in self and glory since signing for Chelsea. He's already been replaced by Edouard Mendy, who looks already 10 times the keeper that Kepper is. Signed because he apparently was very good with his feet, was the interpretation. I'm very sceptical of that. His average pass percentage and volume of passes at Bilbao was average at best. And if you're getting an average progressive keeper with his passing, I think you probably expect a keeper who's at least a above average shot stopper. He is below average. His XG deficit is enormous. I don't know it exactly. I might check it, but his XG deficit is huge. He's not covered in self and glory. Maybe had he not cost £72 million, maybe if he was like £20-30 million, which is realistically probably what he's worth, maybe then you sort of go, well, it's not that bad. But for what he was paid for, he has to go in the bin. Probably the worst so far. Definitely the worst so far. Probably the worst we're going to see so far in this list. So Kepper, £72 million, flop in the bin. Okay, we've got our next player, that being the record signing for Crystal Palace, that being Christian Benteke. £28 million he was signed for from Liverpool. Amazingly expensive, of course, for diminished returns. Certainly not in the bin, I wouldn't say. Basically, off the back of that first season, 16-17, he got, 15 league goals in 36 appearances. Pretty much kept Palace in the division that season with them goals. And in spells has looked really good, particularly this season. He's had some really good moments. A couple of moments of madness. I think he's had a couple of red cards already, but has looked pretty good in the moments that he's had. I think he facilitates Zaha and Eze quite well. And £28 million back in 2016 was a lot of money. Now is kind of league average for a striker, I would say. So I think we're going to pop him in C. Definitely not a bin player because he scored 15 goals in his first season, which is quite good, especially for Palace, but really hasn't maintained that form. So I'm hastened to put him any higher or lower, really. I think C suits him to a T. All right, so we've got now the record signing for Everton, that being, I genuinely can't believe this, £44 million for Gylfi Sigurdsson. He's definitely not bin. He's probably between C and B for me. 20 goals, I believe, and about 120 appearances for the Toffees. Has looked decent in spells. This season he seems to have found himself a home in that squad as the advanced playmaker in a midfield three alongside Allen and Decore, where he basically doesn't have to do any running and he can use his decent passing. Signed off the back, of course, of Swansea being relegated when him and Fernando Llorente basically were their only decent players that season. It was the season that they had like Renato Sanchez and Roque Mesa, and made some really interesting signings and they just didn't really work out. Gylfi Sigurdsson, of course, £44 million sent to Everton, where I would say he's probably been a high C. If you asked me at the beginning of the season, I would have said maybe like low C or maybe even bin, but he's done quite well this season, played pretty well, had some decent games, and definitely not a £44 million player, but at the same time, you know, he's done all right. He's done all right, hasn't he? So yeah, we'll go C with Gylfi Sigurdsson. Okay, next up we have got the Fulham record signing, that being Jean-Michel Seri, signed from Nice in 2018, I believe, when they were promoted to the Premier League. Is still their record signing today. Made about 30 appearances during that season, scoring just once. He has been on loan since at Galatasaray. Wasn't brought back for this season, which I feel says a lot, considering they brought back Zombo and Gisa and a couple of the other players that they had on loan when they got relegated. Haven't brought him back, obviously says quite a lot about what they think of him there. I'm tempted to put him in bin, but for £27 million, it's not that bad of a deal. He was never the best player, but he's definitely a better player than like Wesley, who was 23 million, I think, from Club Brugge. So I'm going to put him in the low of C. Maybe I'll move him to the top end of B. But I think it's hard to put him any lower than that because he had one season in a really bad Fulham team that just had no cohesion, had 3 different managers throughout the season. I think maybe if he was given a chance in this Fulham team, maybe he would have done better, considering there's a bit more, again, cohesion and fluidity in that midfield. But we're never really going to know because he's probably going to leave at the end of the season. So we'll put him in the low Cs. Not looking too good so far. No A's or S's as we sort of get towards that halfway stage. Let's move on to our next player for Leeds. Okay, next up we have got the record signing for Leeds United. This is the most recent, I believe, as of right now. That being the arrival of Rodrigo Moreno from Valencia. He's made 11 appearances in the league, I believe, so far. Scored a couple of goals. Mainly been playing in midfield, or certainly midfield in Bielsa's system. More like a second striker, but I quite like him. I think he's been quite good so far. He was signed for £27 million, just like Jean-Michel Seri. I've got no reason not to like it. It's a lot of money for a guy who's 30-ish. I think he's either 30 or just turned over 30, which is a lot of money, but at the same time, I think that's really the going rate for for strikers in the Premier League at the moment, and he's been decent, I think. I think we're going to put him in the Bs, probably, solidly in the middle. I think it's a bit too soon, really, to judge how good he's actually been. Basically, just because he's not had the chance to really show it, He's not playing in his really preferred position. He is probably naturally either a right-sided attacker or an attacking midfielder, maybe a second striker. And he's playing in a midfield 4 ahead of Calvin Phillips in that Leeds system, so probably not his natural position. But it's definitely interesting to see how he's adapted to the Premier League quite quickly. Him and Rafinha, I think, are going to be quite interesting signings for Leeds in the long term, and it'll be interesting to see how they adapt to the Premier League. But I think we're going to put Rodrigo Moreno in B for now and move on to our next one. So next up, we've got the record signing for Leicester City, that being Yuri Tielemans, that they paid in 2019. He spent half the season on loan with them, with Adrian Silva going the other way, who was, I believe, previously the record signing from Monaco. He made 13 appearances during that first spell, scoring 3 goals, then came on a permanent where he's made about 50 appearances in the year and a bit since he signed permanently. Pretty much 2 years to the day that he signed. I think he's been really good. I think he's metronomic in that midfield. I think he partners Wilfred Ndidi really well in that midfield, being a bit more of a progressive passer. I think it's quite hard to quantify statistically what he's good at. But I do think he's a really useful player. He's a good passer, a decent dribbler, a decent defender, has scored goals. I think he scored 9 or 10 goals for Leicester in the year and a half he's been there. I think all round he's a fairly useful player. I wouldn't say he's a B, I'd say maybe an A, low A maybe. Just basically because I think £40 million for a guy who is like 21, 22 and already has like nearly 200 senior appearances. Like I remember playing FIFA back in like 2013, 2012 when he was a wonder kid on that, and he was 16 making appearances for Anderlecht, and now he's £40 million at Leicester. Probably at his level. I wouldn't say he's any higher than that, but certainly not an issue with me. I'd say a solid A, maybe a low A. Definitely not a B, but definitely not an S. Okay, so with that, we are now halfway through our signings and we move into, in my opinion, the best record signing on this list, that being Liverpool's record signing, Virgil van Dijk, who is going straight into the S tier. Of course, infamously signed from Southampton during the January of 2018 for £75 million, then a record fee for a defender, since broken, of course, by Harry Maguire. I've never seen a player transform a team positively as much as Van Dijk has. Of course, you've got to look at Alisson, Alexander-Arnold, Mohamed Salah, Fabinho, of course. But I've never seen one player come in and within a game or two turn a team into something completely different. Liverpool, before he signed, were playing the likes of Matip and Gomez and Lovren in their defence, and Ragnar Klavan, or whatever his name is, who went to Cagliari. Since he signed, he has been omnipresent basically since that knee injury. that he sustained earlier this season. How you can't put him in the S tier? Like I say, I've never seen a player transform a team so much. Like, you talk about players epitomising teams, you think of like Kevin De Bruyne at Man City or Bruno Fernandes at Manchester United, epitomising that style of play. Van Dijk, for me, is the personification of the success Liverpool are right now, the immediate impact he's had. I know I'm sort of singing his praises quite a lot. I promise I'm not a Liverpool fan, but he's been insane, just insanely good for them. Has to go in the S tier as we move into our next player. Speaking of which, our next player is Manchester City's record signing, that being Rodrigo, the arrival from Atletico Madrid at the beginning of last season. 24-year-old was signed for a club record fee of about £63 million and has since gone on to make about 50 appearances for the Citizens. And I feel harsh saying he's been a flop because he's had some really good games. I think about the game he had against Sheffield United a few weeks ago where he was everywhere on that pitch. And I really just think it depends on the opposition. I don't think he's got the legs to do what Fernandinho can do, where he just runs his socks off the entire game. I think he needs a Bernardo Silva, a Fernandinho, a Goodwin alongside him to just cover that extra ground he can't do. Because when he has that, he is an exceptional defensive midfielder who is a great passer and a goal threat, obviously being a big guy. I think he's about 6'1", 6'2". That threat from set pieces on its own is got to be worth something. I think I'm going to put him in the low Bs. Again, he probably needs a bit more time to sort of justify his price tag, similar to Rodrigo, another Rodrigo, earlier in the video. I think really for similar reasons, it's just not been long enough to really tell how good he's been. And we saw that, Fernandinho needed time to bed into Guardiola's system, as did a lot of the players. And I think naturally as time progresses, he certainly can't get any worse. And £63 million in 2020 isn't really that bad when you think of the money paying for the likes of Harry Maguire, £80 million. So yeah, I think B is a fine place for him to be at the moment. So next up we have got the record signing for Manchester United. I'm surprised it's actually Pogba. I thought it would be Maguire, but apparently it's Pogba. Signed for a fee of £89 million in the summer of 2016. Of course, has divided opinion really. I think he's had some exceptional periods of play and then some really bad periods of play. I think at the moment he seems to be a bench player, or at least a rotation player, and £89 million for that is interesting, certainly. He was, I think, exceptional during 18-19, where he was the club's top goal scorer during that season. Then had injuries last season, and this season sort of fitness and the issues from long COVID. So I think, 118 appearances, about 30 goals. So that's pretty good. Of course, defensively, he doesn't really do that much. He just wants the ball to feet so he can create basically from a deep position. I think if you give him a Dennis Zakaria, an N'Golo Kante, someone who is just a lights out, 6 tackles and interceptions a game defensive midfielder who's a decent progressive passer, I think if you give him that at the base of a 2, he would be amazing. You see what he does for France on a regular basis because he has Kante next to him. Unfortunately, Matic, McTominay, Fred, as good as certain aspects of their game are, they're just not Kante. And so I think Pogba needs that alongside him, and it'll be interesting to see if that actually happens. I think a B, again, he's had really good sparks during his career at United, which you would suggest maybe an A, but I just think the lack of consistency, you can't put him any higher than a B. £89 million though, that was a world record fee at the time. Should he maybe be a C? I kind of want to come back to that because I kind of want to put him in C. Because I just think for the amount of money they paid for him, you have to be so consistent in that role. And maybe United, we'll put him in B because I think United have failed him a little bit in certain aspects of his game. He's not had the guarantees he probably wanted when he signed for the club. So we'll leave him in B, solidly in B, maybe towards the low end, but certainly no better. The next player on our list is Linton, the record signing for Newcastle United, £40 million paid in the summer of 2019 for the Brazilian services to Hoffenheim. 3 goals in 50 appearances. I kind of wanted to put him in the bin at first, but then you kind of realise, he's a very He's still pretty young. He's only like 24. He could get better. I think alongside Callum Wilson, where he gets to drop a bit deeper, pick up the ball, do stuff with it. I think with that, he has a lot of scope to offer the team because they don't really have, Wilson, wants to get behind his man. Carroll wants the ball into feet to lay it off. I think Joe Linton's something very different. £40 million is a lot of money, so I'm going to put him towards the low end of C's. I don't think you can really, make any decisions to put him any higher than that, though. So the next player on the list is the current record signing of bottom-placed Sheffield United, that being Sander Berg, signed from Genk, I believe, or Ghent, in the Belgian league. Of course, he's had a pretty tough time of it in the Premier League this season, obviously being bottom place. But I really like him. I think he's a unique player. His dribbling ability is really good. He's a good passer. He's big. He's physically strong. And £20 million to sort of take a gamble on a player like that, I think is a really smart piece of business because I think he'll go for more. It reminds me a bit of Jorginho Wijnaldum to Newcastle or Harry Maguire to Hull. If they go down his sell-on value, especially if they maybe add like a sell-on clause within his contract for when he gets sold to whoever he leaves when they get relegated, I think it turns to be a very interesting piece of business. I really like him. I think he's got a lot of upside. Certainly at the age he's at, he's a young guy, a lot to contribute to the team. And so I think I'm going to put him in the Bs alongside Rodrigo and alongside other Rodri, between two Rodris, because I think he's got a unique skill set that I think a team like Liverpool or Tottenham could really benefit from if Sheffield United is to be relegated. And £20 million in this day and age really isn't that much. And even if he stays with them in the Championship, I think he's got the quality to get them back up again. So we'll stick him in the Bs and move on to the next one. Okay, next up we have got Yannick Vestergaard, the record signing for Southampton. Cost them £22 million back in 2018, I believe, from Borussia Mönchengladbach. I remember that 9-0 loss to Leicester last season. He was awful. Genuinely one of the worst defensive performances from a player I've ever seen. And since then has actually rebuilt himself to be a very fine defender. I think his age isn't the best and he's pretty immobile in the centre of that defence, but £20 million isn't a lot really for a defender, particularly coming from a Champions League club like Borussia Mönchengladbach. So I'm going to put him in the C's, maybe between Sigurdsson and Benteke. Maybe behind no, we'll put him there, because he's had some horror show performances since he signed for the club, but has also played some decent games. This season he's been pretty solid at the centre of that defence, maybe has a shout as one of the best defenders this season. But it's kind of dribs and drabs, so we're going to stick him in C. And for his sake, I hope he gets a bit better. The next player we've got on our list is Tanguy Ndombele, who is the record signing for Tottenham Hotspur, £54 million last season. I thought it was Giovanni Lo Celso, but apparently it's not. But that's by the by. Ndombele has played quite well this season. I think he's been effective. I still don't think he's really being used in his best position. He's being played behind Kane and Son up front as like an attacking midfielder. He isn't an attacking midfielder. He's a ball progressor. He's a stupidly good dribbler, a competent enough defender. I think in a 3 alongside Lo Celso and Højbjerg, he would be incredible, like on the left-hand side of that, where he's got a bit of license to sort of roam, make tackles, get the ball upfield. Lo Celso and Højbjerg being a bit more disciplined. And I'd be interested to see if Mourinho does that. Was pretty lauded in his first season as being a flop. I actually think he was quite good, particularly under Poch, who was quite useful. His dribbling ability certainly is a useful asset. So I'm going to put him in the Bs. Again, sort of in the low Bs. Maybe higher than Rodri, higher than Berg, higher than Rodrigo. Between Pogba and Rodrigo, I think. He's obviously, it's a lot of money to pay for a midfielder, but at the same time, he's young, he's going to improve. He's certainly there for the long haul. He seems to have gotten Jose's good books. So yeah, I'm happy for Ndombele to be in there in the B tier. Next up, I believe we have the oldest transfer record in this team, or in this ranking, I should say, and that being Solomon Rondon, the record signing for West Bromwich Albion, which was in 2015. He was signed from Zenit. for a fee of £16 million, which is actually quite a sniff, really. Really good. He's playing out in China at the moment. For West Brom, he wasn't amazing. He had a couple of decent seasons. They got relegated and was then swapped with Dwight Gale for Newcastle and was really good for Newcastle in that one season, I remember. I'm going to put him in the C's, probably again mid-C's. £15 million or £17 million or whatever it is. It's not a lot of money for a striker, really, and for what he contributed, I think is quite good. Definitely not, he was not tearing up trees or anything like that. He was useful, but tearing up trees, tearing up stumps, whatever the saying is, I don't know. But he was very useful for them, had some good performances, and I think a C is pretty justified. Fairly decent goal scoring record for the club. Was decent for Newcastle, where he was still technically a West Brom player, and is now playing in China, I believe. So yes, let's move into the penultimate player. So our penultimate player is Sebastian Aller from West Ham. He was signed for a fee of £45 million from Eintracht Frankfurt. I think if the fee had been half as much, he'd be a B or an A, because I actually think he's been quite good in spells this season. His finishing's not the best, but he's good with his link-up play. His running's pretty good. He's not really playing in the position he likes. He's probably better behind the striker, I would say, with someone like Antonio in front of him. Like a front four of Antonio up front, Bowen and Fornals either side, and then Haller in the middle, where he kind of goes up really tight with the striker. I actually think would be a really interesting style for them to play. But nonetheless, we're going to put him in C, I think. Probably at the top of C's. I think of these, he's probably been the best. If I can get him ahead of Sigurdsson, there we go. I think of the C's, he's probably been the best. He had a pretty good start to his career at West Ham, then dropped off a little bit, then picked up at the end of the season and at the beginning of this season. But I think time will tell as to whether he is, in the long term, a good signing for them. Finally, we've got Wolverhampton Wanderers and their record signing, £30 million arrival, Raul Jimenez, who made his deal permanent in the summer of last season following his first season on loan from Benfica. I'm going to put him at the top of the A's, ahead of Tielemans. Definitely not an S, because I don't think he's as good as everyone says he is, and he is 30 as well, so he's not got a lot of upside. But he is a very good striker. He's contributed well. He brings the forwards into play, which I think is a really underrated facet of his game. And I would say for £30 million, yeah, he's a bit older and he doesn't have much sell-on value, and realistically, he's probably only going to go abroad. But for the money they paid for him and for the output they've had from him, obviously since his horrific injury, which hopefully he recovers from in the near future, be great to see him back out again. I think he's been exceptional for Wolves, and is probably the second best player in this list so far behind Van Dijk. So before we end, I'm just going to make a couple of tweaks. I think we're going to move Pogba ahead of... Do we move him ahead of Pepe? I feel like I put Pepe a bit high. I might move him down a bit. Maybe move Pogba up a bit towards there. Ndombele probably has been better than Pepe this season. Mopay's fine there. Wood's fine there as well. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that now. It was mainly the B's where it gets pretty congested throughout there. But that's it for the tier list, so we'll just run through them quickly. In the S tier, we've got Virgil van Dijk on his own. In the A tier, we've got Raul Jimenez and Yuri Tielemans. The B tier, we've got Chris Wood, Paul Pogba, Neal Mopay, Tanguy Ndombele, Nicola Pepe, Rodrigo, Sander Berge and Rodri. In the C tier, we've got Haller, Gylfi Sigurdsson, Yannick Vestergaard, Christian Benteke, Solomon Rondon, Jean-Michel Seri and Jo Linton. And in the bin, we've got Wesley and Kepper. What do you think of where I've put the players in this tier list? Personally, I think there probably could be a bit more movement, but I think I'd need to give it a bit more time, and time's kind of running out on this recording, so I don't want to give it that much more. But I'll be sure to leave a link to it in the description below so you can go try it for yourself, and you can then share it with me on social media, on both Instagram and Twitter. You can send me them and I will let you know if I agree or if I think you're absolutely stupid for where you've put Jo Linton in the S tier, or whatever you choose to do. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at MaxDJGoodwin. And until the next video, this will be going out on Christmas Day, I think, is my plan to have this out on Christmas Day. So have a great Christmas, have a safe Christmas. Hopefully it is as enjoyable as it possibly can be, despite the fact that half of us are living in tier 4 this Christmas. And be sure to stick around for New Year, where we've got a couple more videos. and then 2021, where the channel will hopefully take a few more strides forward like it did this year. Until next time, I will catch you later.